Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our E101 series, Environmental Management 101. And we have today, our topic is stormwater permits and industrial stormwater. My name is Jennifer Collins, and I am the manager of the Pollution Prevention and Compliance Assistance section here at the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. And I welcome you to today's session. We will be covering this very important topic, and we have a lot of guests, as I mentioned, who have registered to hear our speaker today. And it does apply across the board. So we're glad to have you with us, and we hope that you learn a lot from today's session. Just a couple notes of housekeeping. If you'll please remain muted and off screen, we are recording today's session, so we would appreciate you remaining off screen unless we open it up for you during our question and answer session. So we will have a couple different times throughout the day for you to ask questions. And we ask that you put your questions in the chat box. If you have specific questions during the beginning of the talk, we will answer all of those at the end of the presentation. So go ahead and put them in as you think of your questions, and we will be sure to address those during the question and answer time frame. And if you want at that time, you can raise your hand during the question and answer session, and we will take your question live. So today, we also want to cover a little bit more about our compliance and technical assistance program for you. And so we'll have another speaker presenting on that as well. So we will go ahead and introduce today's speaker. Today we have Randy Braun. He's a certified professional in erosion and sediment control and a certified professional in municipal stormwater management. He is the section chief of the stormwater and wetlands programs here at the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, Office of Water Quality. He received his Bachelor's of Science degree from Purdue University in May 1980. During his first 7 years, Randy worked for the Indiana Department of Natural Resources on Indiana's Accelerated Soil Survey program. In August of 1987, Randy transferred to the position of stormwater specialist, and in November 1991, became the assistant director for the DNR Division of Soil Conservation, Stormwater, and Sediment Control program. As the assistant director, Randy oversaw the field implementation of the stormwater construction site runoff program, which was jointly administered with a sister state agency. And on May 2nd of 2005, Randy accepted a position of stormwater program manager with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. His responsibilities include implementation of NPDES stormwater regulations related to construction, industrial, and municipal separate storm sewer systems, MS4s. Randy is currently the section chief for the stormwater and wetlands program that includes NPDES stormwater regulations related to construction, industrial, MS4s, 401 water quality, and state regulated wetlands programs. And he is also the liaison to the Indiana Association for Floodplain and Stormwater Management. And he received recognition in 2013 for excellence in stormwater management presented by the INAFSM. And he currently serves as a member of EnviroCert, International Incorporated Strategic Advisory Council. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Randy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jennifer. As Jennifer said, I'd like to just go through some of the, initially, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, okay, my slides aren't forwarding, so just a minute, having some technical problems. Let's see. There. I'd like to talk a little bit about the process we're going through right now of converting our conversion process, going from our Indiana Administrative Code to Master General Permits. This is a long overdue process that we have. I mean, it's in response to US EPA. We're going to go from the general permits that were promulgated by rule to administratively issued master general permits. Part of the reason for this change is potential conflicts that we have with the approval process for administrative rules. Many of the individuals, or at least some of the individuals that sit on the Environmental Rules Board, are actually permittees with us. So under some of these stormwater permits. The other part of the process is that we haven't really updated the stormwater regulations since 2003. There have been some minor updates, but overall, construction stormwater, municipal stormwater, and industrial stormwater have not been updated since 2003. So as I said, last time we updated everything was 2003, with the exception of a few minor changes. The draft permits are going to be based on, and we're currently working on these, just going to be based on our experiences in implementing Rule 5, Rule 6, Rule 13, as most of you know them. So, and then the other part is we're going to be looking at the federal stormwater regulations and try to update those to meet our current, so we're current with the federal regulations. So basically, as you know it, as Rule 13, Rule 5, Rule 6 are going to go away. Those will no longer exist, and we will actually have a permit document for each of those programs. Some of our experiences are, as I said, implementing a program, but for example, for construction stormwater, we're using the 2017 construction general permit that EPA issued as a guideline. And then we're looking at some of the current remand rules that were associated with MS4 changes over the years. And then as we move into this, the industrial stormwater is going to be based on the most recent multi-sector general permit issued by EPA. So the process, I'm kind of giving you an idea how this works. IDEM drafts a general permit. We submit that draft to EPA for review. And then we took a little different approach on stormwater regulations. We put together advisory groups to get input after we heard back from EPA, and put these groups together to kind of go over the permit that EPA initially approved. As we go through that process, we try to incorporate changes into the draft permit. Once we get to a point where we feel comfortable with input from the advisory group and from the public, because the way the advisory group is kind of set up is that we'll contact different organizations, and as that representative for the organization goes through that advisory group process, our expectation is they'll reach out to their constituents and get feedback between meetings. So we feel like we get a lot of input on the development of the permits this way. Then we submit a final draft to EPA for final review, and with the intent to get a non-objection letter. For the current process for rural construction stormwater and MS4s, we're going to be holding some public meetings to basically share the final permit that EPA has approved, and then we will public notice the final permit. So just give you a little background where we're at as far as the permits. The construction site, stormwater permit, and the MS4 permit. The drafts have been submitted to EPA. We've gone through all the advisory group meetings. We public noticed the permit, both permits, and then received comments back. Just recently, as of probably 2-3 weeks ago, we submitted the construction permit to EPA for final review. And we just sent the MS4 permit to EPA on Monday of this week. So at this point in time, for those two permits, we're waiting for that process to go through. EPA has up to 90 days to review those permits, but we anticipate to get information back from them sooner than later. And then we can move through and get those two permits issued. The third part of this process is the industrial stormwater permit, which is where I'm going to kind of focus today on our current activities under Rule 6. We're working on the industrial stormwater permit right now. We've been working on it for a little over a year, looking at the multi-sector general permit from EPA. Once we finalize that draft, then we're going to submit that draft document to EPA and go through that same process that I described that we use for construction in MS4. The timelines that it's been a lengthy process. The MS4 permit, going through all these processes, has taken up to a couple of years. One thing I do want to emphasize, I do have several individuals that I've had discussions with that potentially will be participating on the advisory group for the industrial stormwater permit. So if there's somebody out there that's interested, email me your name and contact information, and then I can submit your name for consideration to the advisory group. So really what we want to focus on today is currently how we're implementing our industrial stormwater program. Currently, it's through Indiana Administrative Code 327 IAC 15-6. Eligibility to obtain permit coverage. It's basically facilities that operate under specific standard industrial classification codes or meet a narrative that's described in 327 IAC 15-6-2. And then the discharges have to be associated with a point source discharge. There are a couple of exclusions that we have implemented. One of them is in Rule, excuse me, in Rule 6, and that's the no exposure exclusion. This is contained in Rule 6 in detail, and you have to meet certain criteria that you do not have any kind of industrial activities exposed to stormwater. And the other thing that we have considered in the past, and we take on a case-by-case basis, is a no discharge exclusion. In other words, there's no point source at the facility. And just talk a little bit about no exposure. Basically, it's a certification by the operator of that industrial activity that no materials or any other activities are exposed to stormwater. All the materials and activities are protected by storm-resistant shelters to prevent exposure to rain, snow melt, and runoff. And then the other is the no discharge exclusion, which we basically handle through a termination form to get that exclusion. And basically the operator has to demonstrate and certify to us that runoff from the facility does not discharge through a point source. So you could have sheet flow or something like that. A good example of an area where we might see a lot of no discharge exclusions is in areas where we have industrial activities, industrial facilities putting in infiltration systems. For example, in the Elkhart St. Joe area, there's quite a few bit of the stormwater that's handled through infiltration into groundwater, where they may put in a basin and therefore eliminate any kind of discharge through a point source. Through the MPDS program, we typically do not regulate groundwater. Now, if you're in an area like that and you're discharging stormwater into groundwater, one of the one of the provisions of that, we may require there be some kind of pretreatment before it discharges to that infiltration basin. And typically this is worked through, we work this out through local municipal separate storm sewer systems, or MS4s, as they have some requirements locally, regulations locally. So when we get into those situations, we'll often pull in an MS4 to work with us in doing some kind of pretreatment to protect groundwater, especially if we're in wellhead protection areas. So to obtain permit coverage under Rule 6, basically you submit a notice of intent. Initial NOI submittals, the coverage will begin on the day we receive the application. It takes a little time to process those, but typically we will start it on the day the application is received. And then for a renewal of an NOI, to renew your permit coverage, we basically extend that from the date of the previous permit for that facility. Talk a little bit about compliance schedules. So you get your NOI. We do issue a notice of sufficiency letter. That notice of sufficiency, all it does is establish the dates of your permit and give you some basic information about the permit coverage. But basically, once you submit that NOI, you should start the process of implementing your permit, which all the details are contained in 327 IAC 15-6. So when that happens, when you get the permit coverage and you submit your NOI, you should start to develop and implement your stormwater pollution prevention plan. That first year is really when you need to focus on development of that plan, evaluating. I got muted, Jennifer, my back.
Yes, you're back.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So in that first year, you're going to you're going to be required to conduct annual sampling. The earlier you can do that in the process, that would help develop your stormwater pollution prevention plan. You should start conducting your quarterly visual monitoring. Basically, in this first year, you're basically assessing what your facility looks like, where all the stormwater drainage is. You're making a thorough evaluation of your facility and developing that stormwater pollution prevention plan. When you get your sampling done, you submit a stormwater monitoring report. And as I said, the first year is an assessment tool that helps you in developing your stormwater pollution prevention plan. And it also helps you set up a baseline for future sampling, because one of the things with Rule 6, it's a continuous improvement process. We use benchmarks provided by EPA to kind of measure where you kind of fall as far as your sampling. And I'll talk about those in a little bit, but you're going to compare sampling as you move through your permit cycle. So you're going to try to those numbers you get through your sampling, you're going to try to improve that. For example, if you have TSS of 1,000 on your first sample, the approach of this permit is performance based. And what you're going to have to do is start making further assessment of your facility and say, okay, what can I do? Or what kind of management measures can I put in place? What kind of processes can I change at my facility to start bringing those numbers down from 1,000? And then you would prove that you're making improvements through the permit cycle in reducing those sampling requirements. And then subsequent years, you're going to be comparing all that data. We don't require the stormwater pollution prevention plan to be submitted, but you have a checklist that is required to be filled out. It basically certifies that you've gone through the process and your stormwater pollution prevention plan meets all the requirements of the rule. So that has to be submitted within the first 365 days of permit coverage. So 365 days from submitting your NOI, you're expected to submit that checklist. And then during that time period, towards the end of that first year, you would submit an annual report that summarizes your sampling data. It also would talk about any kind of improvements you've made at the facility. I'm having trouble again with my slides. I don't know, Jennifer, the slides won't advance, so I'm not sure.
Perhaps resharing or clicking on it with a mouse.
What's that? Oh, there it goes. Okay, sorry about that. So talk a little bit about your stormwater pollution prevention plan. Basically, the purpose is to identify potential pollutant sources that might be associated with your facility. And every facility is going to be a little different depending on what kind of operations you have at that facility. And then evaluate potential for pollutants to be exposed to stormwater. One of the things we encourage facilities to do is, as you're going through this first year of permit coverage, are there things you can do to reduce the exposure of pollutants? Not that you're necessarily going to be able to be eligible for no exposure exclusion, but if you can achieve that, that's the best thing you could do, because that eliminates sampling and a lot of the reporting. But as you go through that first year, if you can make improvements at your facility to reduce that exposure of industrial activities to stormwater, that's going to help you overall during the next 4 years of your permit. And then as you go through the process, you're going to develop and implement practices and measures to reduce or eliminate pollutant exposure. Are you going to be able to implement treatment controls to eliminate or reduce pollutant discharges? And then through this whole process, you're going to reevaluate the effectiveness of existing preventive treatment practices and measures. Now, a lot of that can be achieved through your annual sampling, but you're also doing quarterly monitoring, which is also another tool that you can use to show or at least manage your facility, make improvements as you go through the permit process. And we encourage, even though quarterly monitoring is required, we encourage operators of facilities to even maybe step that process up a little bit, especially in the first few years of your permit, just to try to improve things and get a better handle on what's occurring at your facility. So stormwater pollution prevention plan, general components include responsible staff, your site plan, soils maps, area map where your facility sits within the regional area. What are your pollutant sources? Have you selected any stormwater quality measures as part of that first year evaluation? It's required to do annual employee training. Of course, your quarterly visual inspections should be in there, and then written preventive maintenance plans. So your compliance, so after you get through the first year, hopefully you've done a thorough evaluation of your facility. You have a pretty good handle on where your stormwater pipes are, your overall drainage system within your facility. One thing we do find with many facilities is that sometimes if they're going into a older area that had industrial activity before, sometimes or a building, they may not know where all the storm drains are, or if drains within the building are connected to the stormwater system. So those are kind of things to look out for in that first year of permit coverage. In the second year, compliance schedule for second through fifth year permit, you're going to continue to implement your pollution prevention plan and modify that plan based on industrial operations and sampling. Think about the stormwater pollution prevention plan as a living document that's going to be updated and as a tool to manage your industrial facility. And then conduct your annual monitoring and submit the results. Continue to conduct your quarter visual monitoring. And then based on sampling results and observations, make modifications to your operations, install additional stormwater management measures. this is critical that you use the stormwater pollution prevention plan to manage operations, and you use your quarterly and visual monitoring to work towards continuous improvement of the activities at your facility. And then, of course, every year you submit an annual report. Permit coverage is required to be renewed every 5 years, and you'd submit that 90 days prior to the expiration of the permit. And the no exposure is basically the same. It's good for 5 years, and 90 days before your no exposure expires, you're required to submit that no exposure to IDEM to renew it. So when you submit your NOI, you're going to identify all your outfalls. If for some reason during the permit cycle, you eliminate or add an outfall, you need to submit an amendment or a modification by submitting an NOI to us and add or remove those outfalls. All the outfalls identified, you're in the NOI, that's where you're required to sample annually. We base it on this permit start date. For example, if your permit began on April 15th, 2017, your first sample would be taken between April 15, 2017 and April 14, 2018, and so on. So as you move through the second year, it's going to be April 15th on this example, 2018 through April 14th, 2019. So keep that in mind. The rule reads a little different, but this basically keeps a standard timeline for each permittee to submit their sampling results. And then, for example, on the annual report, in this example, you would be submitting that annual report towards the end of within the month or so of April 15th, 2017. So your sample is required to be taken from a measurable rain event of 0.1 inch or greater, and at least 72 hours from the previous measurable event. So you need to monitor the stormwater, the rain events. We would recommend that maybe you keep a rain gauge on site. Put that in as part of your protocol in your stormwater pollution prevention plan, and have somebody at the facility check that. Also acceptable would be the nearest weather service rain gauge station. And you have to sample during the first 30 minutes of a discharge at the outfall. Now, one thing we do run into once in a while, and we've had some discussions with operators at facilities, sometimes an operator will have a basin and the rain event may occur, but that basin may not discharge. It may not discharge in the first 30 minutes of that rain event. It may discharge an hour, say an hour after the rain started. Well, if that outfall at your basin is your outfall in your permit, then it's acceptable to take that sample. You know, it's 30 minutes of the discharge at your outfall. So if your outfall is at that basin, it's not 30 minutes from when the rainfall started. It's 30 minutes when that pipe starts to generate runoff through that outfall pipe. So that's something to keep in mind too, that basin can buy you a little bit more time to grab your sample. And as I said before, some of the purpose of the monitoring is to do a comparison from one year to the next, to try to reduce those parameters you're sampling for, and then to modify your operations and installation of measures if reductions aren't being achieved. The monitoring, these are the 8 parameters that basically we require in the rule. Now, one thing you're gonna, as we move into the multi-sector general permit, that permit is more specific to different types of industry. So right now, everybody samples for these 8. And then if you have a unique or a specific type of industrial activity, we may add some parameters that you have to sample for. For example, airports. Sometimes we will add some requirements to an airport if they do de-icing. So we can add those. We've had some facilities on their own add some parameters they sample for. But as we move into the multi-sector general permit, certain types of industries are only going to have to sample for certain parameters. I know there's been some concern about going to the multi-sector general permit, that it's more complicated, but certain industries actually are not going to have to sample for as many parameters as we currently do under Rule 6. So there is an advantage there. And as I said, we're going to try to make that transition from Rule 6 to the multi-sector general permit fairly seamless. We want to try to make that new permit very usable and straightforward. So that's one of the advantages of having an advisory group. We're hoping to streamline that process. And I mentioned this earlier, when you do your comparison of data, in Rule 6, and I can't quote the exact place in the rule, but it basically says you need to compare your data and make improvements every year. One of the comments we continually get from facilities is, well, how good is good enough? And what we've done on our website, as well as we will provide what we call EPA benchmarks. EPA has set certain benchmarks for stormwater discharges for all those parameters that I talked about before. And we provide these, although they're not in the rule, we provide these to facilities to basically say, here's some numbers for each of these parameters as you manage your facility that you should try to shoot for and try to achieve those numbers. So under Rule 6, we don't have what we call limits. That's why these benchmarks are important. As I said before, Rule 6 is more performance-based, and these benchmarks help establish a level of performance that you need to achieve. Discharges above the benchmarks indicate that operations of the facility warrant corrective action. Technically, the benchmarks, if you exceed those, are not a violation, but what it would be a violation if those numbers are high and the facility operator is not taking action to bring them down. So that would actually be the violation if we cited somebody that had, say, 1,000 TSS and hadn't brought those down to, I believe the number is 100. If those aren't reduced and no action has been taken by the facility to bring those down, then the violation would be performance-based, that you were not improving the conditions at the facility and you weren't putting the appropriate practices in to reduce those numbers. If your facility is in an MS4, municipal separate storm sewer system, you may be subject to violations of that MS4. So if you're in any of the larger, highly populated counties, cities, or towns that IDEM is designated as an MS4, basically you can be subject to local violations of those local ordinances. And typically MS4s do this through their illicit discharge elimination system. So if you're in an MS4 and they have a conveyance adjacent to your facility and they notice any kind of odor, visual type discharge coming from your facility, they can cite you for an illicit discharge. And they can do that through their local ordinance. So it's important that you monitor your facility and make sure that your outfalls aren't discharging anything that would be a concern locally. Typically, the way the process works, if an MS4 does find a facility that has Rule 6 permit coverage, they will take action at their level. They will also contact the stormwater program, and we will actually go out and do an inspection, do our own inspection to assess that facility for any violations that may be occurring. Sometimes we will do that on our own, and sometimes actually we may bring the MS4 staff onto the facility with us to further assess that, any kind of violations that may be occurring on that facility. And then required to submit sampling results. An MS4 can actually also request, based on the rule, If they see something on your facility, they can actually, or discharging from your facility, they can actually request sampling results, your annual report, and any other information from the facility, your stormwater pollution prevention plan that they believe could be contributing to a violation of their illicit discharge ordinance. So I think this is important to know that not only are you trying to comply or working to comply with IDEM stormwater regulation for industrial discharges, but you're also subject to any kind of local ordinance through this MS4 illicit discharge ordinance. And as I said, if you get contacted by an MS4, oftentimes they'll contact us, but feel free to reach out to the IDEM stormwater program also, and we can work with the MS4 and you to work through the situation. A little bit about regulatory inspections. As part of that process, we tend to review the stormwater pollution prevention plan. Is that plan being utilized to manage facility operations? Are you actually using it? Because we have gone to facilities and they can't produce their stormwater pollution prevention plan. Are you updating that plan based on your sampling, your quarterly visual inspections, operations at the facility? We're going to be looking at all those components and seeing how they mesh with your stormwater pollution prevention plan. As I said before, the stormwater plan is a dynamic document and it's your management tool for your facility. Are you making improvements at the facility? Installation of stormwater measures? Are you changing operational activities? You should be aware of these. They should be documented through your inspection program, in your stormwater pollution prevention plan. Maybe keep a log of changes you make based on those kinds of activities. We'll review sampling data. Although we have the sampling data at IDEM, we're probably going to ask you to pull the sampling data that you have on record at the facility. And then we're going to review the employee training records and program implementation. The operator of a facility should have a training program for all their employees. Those employees should be aware of stormwater requirements. You may have specific people that focus on stormwater. Those people or employees should receive the highest level of training, but it's not unheard of that any kind of employee that works in certain areas, doing certain activities, even people running forklifts and things like that, have some level of training on stormwater based on their job responsibilities. And then we're going to walk the facility with the on-site representatives. Not only is it important for us to look at the data, but we also just want to walk that facility to kind of see and observe the operations on site, the outfalls. Is there any staining? Do we see any outfalls that are failing? We're going to do a pretty thorough investigation of the overall facility, which includes the overall operation, but also the points of discharge from that facility. Key elements, as I said before, we're going to assess facility drainage system, conveyance systems, inlets, outlets. Oftentimes, if we see something coming out of the building or a pipe that's discharging outside and we can't find the source of it, we may even go into the building to see if there's an inside floor drain that's connected to the outside. We have seen situations where there's a lot of activities going on inside the building, industrial activities, where it's not going to sanitary sewer. It's going to a pipe. That storm drain inside is going outside, discharging to the outfall. And the situation, when we run into that situation, that storm drain either needs to be that inside storm drain either needs to be connected to sanitary if it's allowable, or basically it has to be plugged, and a different approach would have to be taken to address those indoor discharges within the building. And then, as I said before, we're going to look for visible erosion, sediment discharges, staining, anything that we might see at the facility. Looking at evidence of past spills, management of stockpiles, salt, sand. If you have a facility where you have any kind of stockpiling, those need to be managed. And we're going to really look at those kind of things. So keep that in mind. Some of the sand and gravel and limestone operations, basically sometimes we'll have a permit through our wastewater section and also a stormwater permit. Stormwater typically focuses on non-wastewater or wastewater activities. So most of the time, like on a sand and gravel operation, the sand and gravel activities where you're washing sand and gravel and that type of thing will fall under a wastewater permit. But your stockpiles, where the material stockpiled, would fall under a stormwater permit. And we do a lot of coordination on with our wastewater permit section when we run into a situation where it's dimensional sand and gravel or dimensional stone mining, to make sure the appropriate permits are basically obtained by the facility. And if we can, we might take that facility out of a stormwater permit and put them all under the wastewater permit, because their operations fit that situation more appropriately. And I already talked about internal floor drains. So keep this in mind, that are not sealed and don't discharge as sanitary. That's something to keep in mind, to make sure you know where your internal storm drains are going. And then the other thing would be vehicle and equipment maintenance areas, fueling areas, maintenance bays, vehicle wash areas are all important for you to manage, and things that we're going to be looking for when we do an inspection. Material handling, including loading, unloading areas. What's the condition of your loading docks? We have a lot of times these will have drains, and those need to be kept clean, managed appropriately. It's part of your good housekeeping activities. Make sure there's not a lot of debris there. Sometimes you can get vehicles going in there that are leaking oil, that type of thing. Can you equip your drains with some kind of absorbent type inlet protection to capture or to absorb any kind of oils and greases and things that would be washing off of the vehicles or falling off the vehicles? Proper containment areas. We're going to be looking at drums, tanks, containers, material storage, runoff management, curbing, diking, secondary containment, shelters at the facility. It's not uncommon to find barrels at a facility that are unmarked, barrels that have material in them that are open, exposed to stormwater or rain events that are overflowing. These are all part of the facility's operational activities and need to be managed. These are the kind of things, though, that we'd be looking for when we go out to a facility. And then just secondary containment as required by 327 IC 2-10. Are you putting everything in secondary containment that is required to be in secondary containment? Spill prevention and response procedures. This is part of your stormwater pollution prevention plan. Management of waste, utilizing proper storage techniques. You can see some of the pictures here. It's a variety of activities that they're not managing or utilizing proper storage management techniques. So your dumpsters, trash compactors, anything like that in your equipment, make sure it's well maintained and it's kept in good order. All of these things at your facility are going to contribute to the stormwater that's being directed to your outfall and is actually going to affect your stormwater discharge sampling numbers. Now, vehicle tracking, most people are familiar with this as far as like the Rule 5 or construction stormwater, But it's also important that your your industrial entrances to your facilities are well maintained. Um, Sometimes these are gravel entrances, and if there's activities internal to the industrial site, there is a potential to track soil or mud onto public highways, even industrial materials onto public highways. Once again, I'm going to bring up the MS4s. Not only is this a violation of Rule 6, but an MS4 could cite a facility for tracking onto their public roads. We have had some situations where a lot of times an MS4 will actually bring in local law enforcement to issue citations on vehicle tracking, because sometimes that can be a public safety issue. The other thing we look at is runoff management. You have a series of stormwater drainage systems on your facility, but if you notice areas where runoff is starting to create gullies, even though it might be like a sheet flow, but as that runoff travels across the ground, it's starting to create gullies and rills. You need to really look at runoff management that's associated with your facility, and maybe put in diversions or something like that that would divert the water to a basin. So runoff management is a very important tool. We typically think of runoff management probably more for construction stormwater, but it is a tool for an industrial site to manage stormwater runoff. Maintenance of installed measures. Any kind of measure you put in is going to require maintenance. And we look at this as far as our inspection process, but once again, anything we're looking for should be part of your management of your facility. So are your outfalls deteriorating? Do you need to make improvements? Do you need to take corrective action? Just make sure you have swales or conveyance channels. Make sure those are stable. This is easily picked up on just day-to-day walking the facility, but especially during your quarterly visual monitoring. Just make sure everything's maintained, and that will actually help you as you move into your monitoring program. So indications of potential problems: poor facility management. So these are kind of things that we typically see that are going to prompt us to maybe take the next step to non-compliance. Significant change in facility operation that changes the quantity or nature of the pollutants discharged. So if we go out there and see some elevated numbers on your sampling data, or we even track we've tracked the numbers that come in that are above benchmarks. And if we see changes where things are not changing as far as the sampling, or we all of a sudden see a spike in 1 or 2 sampling years, we're going to probably schedule an inspection for that facility. And then we're going to start looking at what kind of changes occurred at your facility that may have prompted that. But once again, that's your responsibility as a permittee. You should be looking at those things and trying to address them as you move through your permit cycle. And then exceedance of benchmarks without initiation or corrective or action plan. So if we keep seeing that 1,000 TSS on your sampling results, our first question is, what have you done to try to correct that? You know, you're in your second year of elevated numbers. What have you done to try to correct that? And like I said, it's a performance-based regulation, and it puts a lot of responsibility on the permittee to be proactive and take corrective action. And it's not IDEM's job really to come in and do that for you. So you need to be proactive as you implement your permit. And then just some other indication of potential problems. Stormwater pollution prevention plan's out of date. It hasn't been updated as changes were made. Failure to perform sampling and or quarterly monitoring. Was there any kind of unauthorized release or discharge? A lot of times some of these things will happen, and we work with our emergency response group through IDEM to try to, a lot of times they will notify us of these types of things, or the public will file a complaint and then we'll investigate it, or emergency response will come out and investigate it. and then bring the appropriate program in to address the problem. And then control measures are not properly operated and or maintained. So that's basically what I have, Jennifer. So I guess I can open it up for questions, or I'm not sure how you want to move forward from here.
Well, Randy, we do have several questions that came in during your talk. So I will go with the first one. This one is from Brian McMorrow. Are both the draft construction general permit and draft MS4 as sent to US EPA available to us? How and where?
There's currently a draft permit on our website, on the stormwater page. It's not the version that we sent to EPA at this point in time, because we're not sure. EPA may make some significant changes to the permit. So the version that's up there is the one that was public noticed and that EPA approved the first time. As soon as we hear back from EPA on those two permits, we'll put those, we'll public notice those, put them on our website, and then have a public meeting. But we're not sure at this point in time what changes EPA is going to make.
Okay, thank you for that response. We also have another question. Does the stormwater pollution prevention plan checklist need to be submitted every year? There are varying opinions. This person says there are varying opinions on that.
We required in the first 365 days and not after that.
Okay.
And then just to clarify, maybe when you do when you renew your permit, basically you still have you're required to submit it in that first year of permit coverage on your renewal. Quite a few of the times though, since you're transitioning from one permit cycle to the next, we get quite a few of the stormwater pollution prevention plan certifications with the renewal NOI. So, and actually I'd recommend that, because if you've been updating your stormwater pollution prevention plan throughout that 5-year permit cycle, it should be up to date. So you can just update your checklist and submit that with your renewal.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, we have another question. There's a website that's listed at in.gov, items, stormwater, industrial stormwater permitting, list of industrial stormwater permits. There's supposed to be a list of Rule 6 industrial stormwater permits inventory, but it says that they are currently not available. Where can one find those actual permits for reference?
That evidently that didn't get corrected. And I don't know, Jennifer, there's a way to, what I can do is in the next day or so, I can get that updated to direct it to another part of IDEM's website.
Okay.
What we have a central location for all permits that's updated quarterly. And I will link to that part of IDEM's website. It will actually allow you to pull up a spreadsheet that has all 3 types of stormwater permits, wastewater permits, any kind of MPDS permit that the agency issues. So I will get that updated. I can also send it to you, Jennifer, so you have
that'd
it.
be great. We'll send over the questions, and any of those that need a follow-up, we'll send out with the follow-up email that we'll be sending to participants.
But I think the important thing there is you can actually see any kind of permit that's been MPDS permits that's been issued by the agency, which is actually more helpful than just Rule 6.
Yes. Okay, we've got questions rolling in here. So let me see. So the next question is, where on the IDEM website is the EPA benchmarks for sampling?
I probably will have to.
We'll need to follow up on that.
I'll have to follow up on that one too.
Okay.
And I'll just, yeah, we'll get that worked out.
Okay, I'll make a note.
Me too.
And we also have a question. Can you complete annual sampling at a facility for industrial stormwater within 72 hours of a rain event if the outfalls didn't run on the initial rain event? Some facilities outfalls won't discharge with just 0.1 inches of rain.
Yeah, yes, I think if I understand the question correctly, you should be able to do that because it didn't go through the outfall. So you should be able to do that if it actually didn't discharge. So I'd still wait. Well, actually, I'd still wait to 72. You still should wait to 72 hours before you grab your sample, because part of that, yeah, you need to wait to 72 hours for an event that would discharge through your outfall, because part of that is you don't want any kind of rainfall event to basically clean the pavement. And if you take it within, it was within 24 hours of two qualifying rain events, you potentially would affect the quality of that sample. So you should wait 72 hours.
Okay. Another question is, any reviews plan to switch Rule 9 or Rule 12 over to the MSGP, or I guess that's the general permit in the future?
I'm not sure what Rule 9 is. Rule 12 is the sand and gravel and dimensional stone. Rule 12 has already been repealed, and there is a general permit for that. We don't, those permits are handled through Catherine Hess's group over in wastewater permitting, and Rule 9 is also in that category, but off the top of my head, I can't remember what Rule 9 is.
Okay.
But if you go to the website, you should be able to find I think that permit is called General Permit for Dimensional Stone and Sand and Gravel Operations. So you should be able to search IDEM's website and pull that permit up, or contact Catherine Hess.
Okay, great. And then another person follows up, just to be clear on my understanding of the approval process. If a source has one of the listed SIC codes, do they require a permit by default until no exposure can be proven? Or is it possible to have no exposure determined prior to acquiring a permit?
If you're operational and you qualify for a permit, you need to obtain the permit. If you qualify under an SIC code and at that time you have no exposure, you can apply for the no exposure. But when you submit that no exposure, you need to make sure that your operations currently meet those requirements. I've had this question before. Some consultants and facilities have called and said, well, do I have to submit an NOI if I already meet no exposure? And the answer is no. Go ahead and submit the no exposure. But you can't delay obtaining a permit if you're operational until you get the no exposure exclusion. So you can't take a month or two to try to clean your facility up.
Right.
So you're eligible for no exposure. You need to get the permit. And then what you would do, say if you have a permit for 6-7 months only, and you achieve that no exposure in that 6-7 months, submit your no exposure. We'll terminate the permit, put you under the no exposure exclusion. And then it'll be good for 5 years from that date.
Great, thanks for explaining that. Another question is, DMR submittals are for DMR submittals, Are paper copies still accepted or only electronic submittals through NetDMR?
We are currently accepting paper submittals, but we're in the process right now of working with our compliance section to move everyone towards electronic submittals through NetDMR. We are taking batches of facilities periodically, contacting them and trying to get them signed up for NetDMR.
Okay.
Somebody, I know of quite a few people, we've got 400 or 500 out of 3,000 permits probably that are now transitioning or have transitioned over to NetDMR. And when we go to the new multi-sector general permit, our intent is to make all DMR submittals electronic through NetDMR.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question is, if you are in under a permit, if you are in permit years 2 through 4, will the change to multi-sector occur at the next permit renewal?
We're still looking at how we're going to do that. What we did with construction, we basically left everybody's effective dates in place, but we're going to require them to comply with the new permit. So that's one of the questions and discussions we'll have when we start the process of finalizing the industrial stormwater permit and working with the advisory group. So we haven't made that determination yet.
Okay, thank you. How often are the benchmarks updated or changed?
We have not updated those for a while. We basically, we use what EPA provides us. So we haven't updated those in quite a few years. And the EPA hasn't updated those. Now EPA does have a new multi-sector general permit. So we'll probably be looking at that to see if we need to update those benchmarks. But once again, the benchmark's just something for you to try to shoot for. So it's not anything that's really enforceable as far as the numbers.
Okay. We have another person who asked, when will OWQ begin using VFC?
Quite a few of the programs are in there. We are trying to get our industrial stormwater in there. It's been a slow process. Construction stormwater is a separate database, and that has a public facing side now. But we're working on trying to get our industrial permits and information into VFC. It's been mostly a staffing issue that we've had. If you're looking for something and can't find it, contact the program area. And I should have put this on here. We have a stormwater email account. It's called Stormwat, STORMWAT at idem.in.gov. So that's someplace you can email also.
Okay. I think someone has looked at the website that you were referencing for the permits, and the person says that the Excel sheet just lists who has permits, not the actual permits. Is that correct?
Yes, it just shows who has permits. It doesn't provide the actual permit.
And how would they obtain those actual permit copies?
If it's for something besides stormwater, they could get the permit through the virtual file cabinet. Something to keep in mind, we don't issue any permits for stormwater right now. Stormwater is all based on Indiana Administrative Code. So we get quite a few questions. Where's the written permit? And basically the permit is that Indiana Administrative Code. So if you're looking at what the requirements of the permit are, regardless of what program, you would go to the appropriate Indiana Administrative Code to see what the requirements of the permit are.
Okay, great.
Now when we go to the new general permits, of course, we'll have a one permit for everybody, and that'll be posted to the website.
Thank you. Hopefully that clarifies that person's question. So. All righty. I have another question here. One of the requirements to qualify for no exposure exclusion is to have covered and non-leaking dumpsters. Do outdoor roll-off bins need to be closed all the time, or is it enough if we have the closures lids on before the rain event hits?
They should be equipped to be that you can. They should be equipped with some kind of method to close them. They should probably be closed all the time. Because if we do an inspection and they're open, we're going to probably look to see, okay, do they have a lid that you can close immediately? We have gone to facilities where there's no evidence that they could close that at all, and they say, well, if it's going to rain, then we try to go get a tarp and cover it. They should be equipped that they can be closed at any time. So technically, they really should be closed all the time, but as long as they have a provision there when we come out and look that they could be closed immediately, we should be okay with that as far as an inspection goes.
Okay. Another question is, when there is a NOS letter for an active development, does this mean that the local MS4 stormwater requirements have been already approved 100%, or can it vary based on the location? Do you need me to repeat that?
No,
Okay.
And I was just going to clarify. This is for the construction stormwater program
Okay.
so everybody knows. If the project is within an MS4, we require the local MS4 stormwater permit and or proof that the stormwater pollution prevention plan for that construction project has been approved by the MS4. So our NOS, before we issue that, we're going to make sure that documentation is there from the MS4 before we issue that permit. Now, when we issue that NOS letter, you still need to make sure that there may not, that everything else has been applied for within the MS4. Sometimes in an MS4, the stormwater plan may be intact, but maybe the developer or the permittee has not obtained some other local permits. So those are still, those could still be pending locally. So that doesn't mean you can necessarily start. For example, if you were required to get some other kind of permit with a municipality, you got the local stormwater permit locally, but you didn't get some other permits, you still need to make sure you have all your local permits regardless of what area it covers. So.
Okay. I think we still have a couple other questions here, so we'll continue to answer these questions. There was another question that came in about net DMR. At this point, I think that you said they're not required at this point in time to submit via net DMRs, just a suggestion. Anytime will it be a requirement?
We definitely, when we start working on the multi-sector general permit and get that issued, it'll be required. Like I said, we're in the process right now trying to get a lot of people signed up. It makes things a lot easier to process. It's easier for the facility. We also there's a EPA also has a rule, e-reporting rule, that IDEM has a plan with EPA or a proposal with EPA that we need to move towards electronic reporting. So that's kind of why we're pushing it right now. We're trying to ease into it. It can be difficult to get a lot of permittees signed up right now because we have some parts we have to do for that too. And we don't have a lot of staff in stormwater, and compliance sections helping us with that. So we're kind of contacting facilities as we go, trying to get everybody signed up. But we're also trying to meet, IDEM is trying to meet a requirement by EPA that we go to 100% electronic reporting. So that's one of our objectives too, is to meet those our EPA commitment.
Yes, exactly. Okay. If a facility discharges industrial water to a combined sewer system, storm and sanitary, would they still qualify for a non-exposure certificate?
If you discharge to a combined sewer system, you have to, there's another exclusion, and I didn't have this in the PowerPoint. There's another exclusion for discharging to a storm system, combined storm system or sanitary. Sanitary wouldn't qualify, but discharging to a combined sewer system. And in that situation, you have to get verification from the local municipality that they basically certify that you do discharge to a combined sewer system. And basically you have to get a letter from them on municipal letterhead. And on the notice of termination exclusion form, there is a category for discharging to combined sewer systems. But as part of that, you also need that letter from the local municipality. And most municipalities will issue that letter if they certify that that's accurate. We do have some that sometimes will not issue that letter because they want the facility to obtain permit coverage. And some of those are MS4s that have had problems with illicit discharges from facilities.
I see. Okay, thank you. Another question is, why are MMR submissions required when the same information must be submitted in the DMR portal under the sampling parameter fields?
I honestly, that's a question for our compliance and wastewater section. I don't deal with that program that much. So, because we don't have MMRs for stormwater. So really, Jennifer, I think that's something we can
I'll follow up with that person.
send to Gary Starks or somebody else.
Okay, fantastic. We can do that. Just get that out here. Okay, and now we have a facility might have several outfalls, but only the outfalls that discharge stormwater from industrial exposed areas need to be monitored, correct? How about outfalls that discharge water draining from employee parking lots?
What we typically would require is that you list all your outfalls on your NOI, and then on your NOI, determine that, say it's employee parking, and that's not an industrial activity, that you list that on the NOI and mark that you're not going to sample it because it's not an industrial activity. So we basically say list all your outfalls to characterize them. And then we also have an option where if you have similar industrial activities going to two different outfalls, you can basically call an outfall substantially similar, and then you can choose to monitor one over the other. And we typically will look at those when an NOI comes in. Sometimes if reviewing the NOI, we might say, okay, you said outfall 1 and 2 were similar, but you have a few additional activities, say in outfall 1, but you wanted to sample 2, we may contact you and have you sample outfall 1. So we also have that option of substantially similar.
Okay, great. Another person asked, when is the anticipated effective date where Rule 6 is moving to the general permit for industrial stormwater permitted facilities?
I can give you a general timeline. We are hopefully by the end of the year going to submit to EPA our first draft. EPA will have 30 to 90 days, probably 90 days to review it. Their turnaround's been about 30 to 60. They'll send that back to us. We'll establish the advisory group. And the last two advisory groups we had for Rule 5 and Rule 13 went about a year. Now, whether this permit, the transition lasts that long, I don't know. So we're probably looking at, you know, it's probably not going to be effective until sometime next year.
Okay, thank you.
EPA is trying to get us to get that transition quicker, but
Oh,
we also want to make sure we get a lot of feedback, so we have a permit that we think is, you know, efficient and meets both our needs and that of the permittees. So we're hoping to get a lot of feedback on how that permit's structured and what the content is.
Fantastic. I think we have another additional question based on an earlier one where you talked about the, just trying to find that earlier question. I think this relates to the, hold on just a second here. Basically, if they had listed SIC codes, that one, I think this person is wondering if there are special materials on site, would they still, or if there are unique processes or materials on site, would that still be true that they didn't need to get a permit first before submitting the NOI?
I'm not sure I follow the question. I mean, if that individual wants to reach out to me, I might need more clarification on that. I'm not.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Is OWQ sending out hard copies of NOSs or email? We submitted an NOI in February and have not received an NOS.
We are sending hard copies out. And as I said before, the NOS is just to establish the permit number and some other things. To be honest, we're a little bit behind on getting those issued. We've had quite a few vacancies lately, so we're kind of behind the gun.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Okay.
we still have 2 vacancies, so we're still
2 more vacancies. Okay.
well, I had 5, so we're doing better. But.
Lots of turnover unfortunately. So, okay. What type of changes at an industrial facility might trigger a new notice of intent submission?
A new notice of intent could be, more than likely, the biggest thing is going to be if there's a change in ownership, if that facility is actually sold, which would be a termination and an NO and a new NOI by the new owner. If there are changes at the facility, and it's like I said before, if it's adding an outfall, that type of thing, or even if you had a substantially similar outfall and they're not substantially similar, you wouldn't submit a new NOI. You would submit what we call an amendment, just to update your permit. So example, if you had 2 outfalls, 01 and 02, and you were sampling 01 because they were substantially similar, and now they're no longer substantially similar because you added some kind of activity within the outfall of the other one, then you would want to submit an amendment and basically say you're now sampling both. So we get that in the database. And just to be honest, all of our permit information that we gather through the NOIs is being migrated to the EPA database too. So that's part of the e-reporting role that and transparency that all our permit data at the state level flows to EPA. So we want to make sure everything at the state matches EPA. So we want to make sure that outfalls are similar and that type of thing. EPA periodically will come into the state and inspect construction, MS4s, and industrial sites. Most of the time they contact us and ask us to go with them, but they do still have the overall authority and periodically will come in and do an inspection. So we need to make sure information is up to date.
And is that data through the central data exchange and it flows to the ECHO or the enforcement and compliance history online, or is that somewhere
Goes
else that
through,
it's being?
it's in ISIS at EPA.
Okay,
We have a database here that basically talks to ISIS at EPA.
great, thank you. Also, a question on another amended NOI. Does it need to be amended if the responsible official changes?
We would recommend that we typically don't get those, but I would say at least notify us through an amendment or a letter that the responsible individual has changed. Yeah, so it's not outlined in the rule, but yes, we would say go ahead and do an amendment or a letter that clarifies that responsible individual has changed.
Okay. I think I have covered everyone's questions. Is there anybody that I have not answered your question? You wanna? Any other questions? Okay, thank you for all of your questions. We do have, we'd like to move to our second presentation from Joe Nucleus. And Joe is our Compliance and Technical Assistance Program representative in the Northern Regional Office. Randy, can you stop sharing your screen? Thank you so much. And Joe is going to talk a little bit more about our Compliance and Technical Assistance Program. And Joe, if you wouldn't mind coming on video and talking to us about what our services are.
Oh, looks like it'll work that time.
All
Can you hear
right. Yes, turning it over to you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Randy, a very good program, very insightful. You covered a lot of stuff in that stormwater. That'll be very helpful. Well, this is going to be a little bit different turn of pace. Most of you have heard of our program before, CTAP, but I'd like to take, for those who are new to our E101 class, a little bit through what we do and how we do it. So please bear with me as we go through it and enjoy. The CTAP is, let me introduce some people here. Now we're forwarding. Jennifer Collins is our manager. She basically guides us through and helps us with our office program supports duties to assist people in their compliance needs. Also helping us today, but you haven't heard much from him, is our behind the scenes Hanny Sherrera, and he is helping, well, basically coordinate this whole experience from the invites and outreach to, quite frankly, everything we're doing here today. And there is me. I am the presenter today, and I will be going through what CTAP is and what we can do for you. And again, as I said, a little how we do it. Okay, let's look at our main premise, what we're built on. We're really all about empowering Indiana businesses to handle issues with environmental issues, compliance issues on their own, or basically just help them through the issues they have. We do this in a free and confidential way. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We are non-regulatory in nature. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we're multimedia. We cover everything on the environmental side. When we say free and confidential, we are free. That means no cost. Any part of the sector of the economy, anybody that's in Indiana's community at all, has access to us free of cost. CTAP offers environmental assistance to Indiana organizations, businesses, and of all sizes. You don't have to be an assembly plant, and you can be a mom and pop shop. Whatever the size, whatever the issue, let us know. We'll reach out to everybody. Existing facilities with legacy issues, long-term issues, some kind of closure issue or problem, we're happy to help you with that. New companies looking to locate in Indiana, we're very big on that. Very active in the economic development stage. Government agencies, if a local business or a local municipality has a concern, we can help them too. Just because you're in the government doesn't mean that you can't get some help. Trade associations, industry groups, environmental consultants are another big resource. We can be a very big resource for them. So if you have any interest in a particular stakeholder issue, please give us a call. We might be able to help you. Also, on the confidential side of free and confidential is the fact that we're a unique entity. We are really not here to get you. Our purpose is to provide a confidential information that can be used, but it can't really be going out to any other offices. Indiana Code 1328-3-4 mandates that CTAP staff can't divulge to anybody, including other IDEM regulatory people, that what information we have about your facility. That means we're truly non-regulatory in nature. I'm not an enforcement officer. I carry no enforcement authority. My job, and my peers that work within the group as well, our job is to assist you. And if there are certain documents or something that identifies a problem, we let you know what the issues are and what you can do about them and make recommendations. But we really can't get into oh yeah, well, I have to pass this on to somebody who can get you. We're not allowed to do that. And as I said, that's covered under Indiana Code 13-28-3-4. Now, there's one exception to that. If there's a clear and present danger, like your building's on fire, we're going to call the fire department. But bear in mind, we really do take the confidentiality creed very, very serious. Non-regulatory, as I mentioned, we're not there to enforce. CTAP staff are not regulators. We don't have regulatory authority or issue any violations, permits, fees, fines, or take any enforcement actions whatsoever. Our main job is to basically, for those who are receiving our services, we won't be penalizing you for reporting of an event. What we will do is give you recommendations on how to handle that reporting, or what you may have to do to make sure you capture everything. Have you looked at all your problems? And if there is some sort of self-disclosure event, we're going to let you know about that as well. CTAP, multimedia. Our staff is all over the board. We have experts in RCRA and air. Very knowledgeable in a lot of different directions. So if you need that assistance in something, you think, well, gosh, they probably wouldn't have anybody that would know anything about stormwater, we can get information on that. Environmental regulators, permitters, requirements, compliance measures, whatever the issue is, if it's air, water, land, resources, or any waste, we can assist you with anything in your self-disclosure nature. Expertise in pollution prevention are another big thing that we help with. Sustainability and planning, project implementation, and continuous improvement techniques are related to human health and the environment. We can help. We have a very good reach, and matter of fact, we just concluded our 2021 prevention conference last month. Experience in preparing and implementing environmental training modules. We're also very committed to the E101 process. That is today's presentation, and has been for quite some time, where we try to reach out on a monthly or a monthly plus basis with a different topic that may be of interest to people, and let them know, hey, we can give you a assistance. And by the way, here's the general information you're probably looking for to begin with. We're developing a leading public outreach initiative and the assisting with community relations strategies. We can help you in all regards. Also, an aside, how do you know what we're giving you is solid information? We offer something called an insurance guarantee. It basically says if we, CTAP, are instructing you to do something and you follow our assistance, and someone comes up in the next following week, and next time you get inspected and says something different, you can break your confidentiality with us and say that you relied on CTAP recommendations, and you're kind of off the hook a little bit. You still may be required to make the change, but we really kind of do away with some fines and penalties if you're relying on our advice. A little map of our state here, and if you're in these parts of the state, we have a CTAP representative that should be available to help you. If you're in the northwestern section, we have Charles Benfeld. He handles the northwest corner. I'm over in the northeast corner, and I'm Joe Nicholas again. If you're in the top half of the state, give us a call. If you're in the mid part of the state, Indianapolis has several very knowledgeable individuals. Tracy Barnes and Hannah Sherry, Mark Stoddard and Crystal Wagner, all fantastic individuals that can help you with specific problems. And if they don't have the information themselves, or they're not an expert in it, they can find somebody who is within our group, and we can speak or collaborate, make sure you've got what you need to be in compliance. In the southwest regions, we've got Heath Dill, and in the southeast region, we have Andrew Dybern. He is, these two guys have really been helping us with our portal, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So they're going to probably be available for CTAP going forward. I'm sure they're just coming off of their being immersed in the environmental portal world for quite a while. CTAP support. We do help to new businesses, prospective businesses navigate through potential regulatory resources based on proposed operating scenarios, provide primary assessment for regulatory reporting obligations, or just estimate some timeframes or costs. We have a lot of that in prefab form, where you ask us specifically, what does it take for an air permit? We can give you some timeframe information. We can give you some operating scenarios. It's very useful. We also assist with the application process for necessary permits. We don't necessarily do them for you, but we can hold your hand as you go through and explain, here's what you need. We can provide the forms, we can provide some guidance, we can provide some tools, and we can provide you some training on how to go through it. And aid development for required calculations. If your issue is something with PTE, we can get you set up on that with spreadsheets, or understanding why we're doing it the way we're doing it, and what 8,760 hours really means. I'll provide example permits from similar operations. Remember, a permit is a public document, and if something's there from another, maybe even a competitor, that says, hey, this is the way we are regulating you, you should be able to see that, so you can see that, you know what, that's what I can expect from my business. I should be regulated very similarly. We can provide with that. We can recommend operational flexibility options, things that you maybe didn't think about. As I said, we've been through a lot of these scenarios before, and there might be something there that might help you. We want to convey institutional knowledge, which is pretty valuable. We're on the inside of IDEM. I've been here maybe 5 years, and I am the newest person on the block. We've got people that have been there as long as, I believe, 35 years. So there is a lot of how we work on the inside available to you. We want to explain programs of interest and voluntary stewardship grants, opportunities, and partnerships, and other award programs that are helpful. We'll talk more about them in a second as well. Help identify potential pollution prevention, or P2 opportunities, during the planning stages for easier and more cost-effective implementation. Provide one-stop shop for information in order to maintain continuity and reduce some duplication of effort. Let's take a little bit closer look at those. Excuse me. Okay, contact CTAP if you want to receive some timely assistance and interpreting a rule or permit question or requirement. Determine what steps are necessary to obtain a permit, operate, or modify a process, amend it. Ask general environmental questions or compliance questions, and request a site assessment. Site assessments we're going to talk a little bit more about too. a very, very valuable tool. And remember, we're non-regulatory. We're not there to get you. We're there to prepare you for the other people that are coming in our group that might get you. And it's not that they're terrible, they're just doing their job. We want to make sure that they get there, do their job, and don't find any problems, keep you in compliance. Submit a confidential request to CTAP Online. We have a new portal system that's absolutely phenomenal. We're working the bugs out, and I struggle with it every day, but it is an excellent program to manage your requests. It keeps things confidential and it keeps things tracked. And by the way, there's some numbers on the bottom if you want to outreach our hotlines. There's a local 317 number for the Indy area and an 800 number for anybody statewide. Okay. Our new portal. As I said, it's a tough thing to deal with, but boy, it is very good at getting you information. IDEM's launched the Compliance Assistance online portal. It's through our website on idem.com, through the Access Indiana part. The new portal is a secure online system that makes it easier for businesses and organizations to request confidential assistance regarding their specific environmental regulation or compliance or permitting issue. In the new CTAP portal, businesses, companies, organizations, individuals, that's consultants and environmental groups, anybody can get into this. Create a secure account for yourself and submit your specific confidential request directly to our people. Now, the rest of the world doesn't have access to what your actual request is. Like I said, though, anybody can make a request. Request confidential site assessment for your business or specific equipment or process. You can have us come out and take a look at your whole facility, or just talk about one specific process within your issue, within your company. We're happy to help with either. Communicate and track interactions with CTAP staff. As I said, we have a compliance guarantee. We want to make sure that that information is tracked, so that you know, oh, wait, where were we when we were last talking about this air issue, or where were we when we were last discussing your RCRA concern. We can pick right off from the last question. If something isn't going right, or there's another question that pops up, we can help with that as well. The other thing that's really sensational about the program is it invites collaborators to work within the company. If it's somebody from your company where you say, wait a minute, let them bring my boss into this. Well, you can bring your boss into it on the same system and track the same issue. So it's not just you, it's your boss or whoever else from your company that you ordain. They can come in and look at our same issue and ask additional questions. If it is somebody from our side that we need to bring in, let's say I need some help with a hazardous waste issue. We have an outstanding person that can come over, and Tracy can help us or jump on as well. And she can give the assistance on top of what we're already handling. If there's an air question, we can bring in a Crystal, and we can get phenomenal answers to things from a very experienced person to say, here's what we need to do. And it's all because we can all feed into the same system and look at the same information at the same time. Provide feedback to the CTAP team to see how we're doing. Yes, we do a lot of surveys, and we ask you to give us your thoughts because it's brand new and we don't have it perfect yet, but we're making it better. And as we get our information and feedback, we can do that much more efficiently. Continual improvement. Available services. And I'm not taking too many breaths to talk about, hey, who has, and I'm not really putting too many questions out there, but please take a look at our Access Indiana sites. There are a lot of information available. Our website addresses and links are to the side here, but available services go all the way from, gosh, Homeland Security to voting to anything you need, and IDEM is in the middle of it. Our new CTAP portal, the Helping Hands portal, is CTAP online portal, can also be reached through the IDEM electronic resources. Say the link on the bottom is portal.idem.in.gov. Better put the HTTPS in front of that. CTAP services, site assessments, as I talked about before. That's one of the services we offer, and a site assessment is free. So if you want another pair of eyes for consultation or determination of a particular regulatory obligation, ask us. We can come out and do that. Current compliance status is a question. We can come out and help with that. If you need to identify a potential pollution prevention opportunity, we can be there to do that as well. And again, we can do that all in one site visit. Or if you don't feel comfortable exposing your whole facility, you can say, hey, I want you to question this part of the process or this specific section in my flow of operation. I need you to look at that. And we can do that and then step back and then give you an assessment. CTAP staff can help with troubleshooting a particular process or regulation. We can't come in and fix your problem on your line, but we can help you with recommendations, and we can do kind of a check, a review of the entire facility or just the process you want. CTAP site assessments may in person, or as we found out through the through our little virus issue, we can say, hey, virtual is good too. If you can show us what you're looking at, if you can give us copies of reports or papers or permits, and we can't pull them up ourselves, or even if it's a picture of what you're looking at, we can help you decipher it. Personal benefits of a site assessment. Every environmental compliance, verified environmental compliance through a facility tour. We can come out and take a look at what you're doing and see if all the rules that would be applied to you are being applied. And we help you determine what you need to worry about and what you need to keep records on and what you need to report on. It's kind of basically giving you the hit list, if you will. We can help you identify potential violations and help businesses determine and evaluate available corrective actions before a regulatory inspector gets there. Remember, we're non-regulatory. We can come in and help you. So if you see an issue or you think you have an issue, don't steer us away from it. Point us to it so we can help give you recommendations to fix it before somebody from IDEM comes in and really provide you with a fine or a fee or a major problem. Assist environmental permit applications, facility records, and compliance reports. Yes, one of the bigger things we do is help quite a bit with people that are going, hey, I think I need a report, but I don't know where to go to get this permit, or I don't know how to start my application process. We're here to help you with that. We address specific concerns or questions related to new regulations, expansion opportunities for your facility, or target areas of concern. You can have a facility-wide question, or you can say, hey, look, I have this small question on a report. What does this mean? Or how does this change my reporting issues? We can help with that. We can discuss pollution prevention P2 issue assessments. These are phenomenal. And I don't think people are really taking full advantage of them yet. But the P2 opportunities and resources are out there to help you run a better business, to be more environmentally compliant, and to basically be more efficient. And that's the key word, is efficient, because you will be able to take problems that used to be a cost and potentially turn them into another revenue stream, or at least eliminate an environmental impact. So pollution prevention is a significant thing. It's not just saying, hey, we recycle. It's saying, what do we do to not even have to get to that point? Training. We also do quite a bit of training, which is a little bit of what we just did today with stormwater. Environmental education and regulated entities. E101. It's a favorite training series offered by CTAP personnel, and it might be a different person from one of our particular branches of environmental concern at any month. Could be air next month, and we'll talk about the schedule here in a minute on that. But yes, they're out there, and the responsibilities to Indiana business are to provide you with good training on those specific environmental concerns. Provide a general overview of the current state and federal regulations affecting Indiana, not just Indiana rules, but to make sure that the federal oversight you don't conflict with any of those. Give you a solid regulatory background and scientific basis for many of these laws. Why do we do what we do? And the associated compliance requirements, what you have to do to be in compliance. Assist environmental managers in the understanding of applicable regulations, and their industry. Provide details on how to apply for Indiana businesses, and demonstrate how to strategically implement practices that assist environmental compliance and sustainability efforts. Sustainability will continue to become much more a main part of everybody's plate. CTAP services and training again. CTAP offers workshops and training on general and industry-specific topics. Reach out to us if you have a concern. We'll see what we can do to help. CTAP staff are also available to tailor a technical presentation or to a trade association or industry group or other stakeholders wishing to know more about particular environmental regulation and compliance. So if you know you have to put on an activity, or if you're doing something on wastewater and you want to have somebody there to give a insight on, here, some new EMR reporting things, some things that might be of interest to you or on the web, IDEM can come out, or CTAP can come out and help you spread the word or give your group specific training. In the E101, we talk about what's coming up next. And we know that our next topic is going to be in November, is going to be on used oil. And I don't have a date for that yet, but used oil rules and regulations will be November's topic. Your PTE, or potential to emit calculations and air permitting, I think is up in December or January. I think they'll take a break in December, but we'll have some dates coming to those soon, and they'll be sent out to you if you registered for a class before. Online resources, CTAP's website. If you haven't had a chance to go take a look at the website, there's a wealth of information there. Please do yourself a favor and go see what we're offering. Sector-specific guidance, regulatory updates. If there's something new happening, we're letting you know on the website first. Training opportunities, when we're going to do these things. Materials, fact sheets. If we have just a question on a particular how-to, there might be a quick and dirty fact sheet that's available to you. Pollution prevention resources, anything in the P2 world. Upcoming events, announcements, additional details about it, CTAP, and links to external resources that will help you with your regulatory goals. Help us to help you. Anyone can contact us at any time or anywhere. The idea is prepare for a consultation with CTAP staff by gathering all the appropriate evaluation data that you think we'll need. And what I mean by that is, don't try to say, hey, we have an issue over here, let's hide that or not talk about it. That's the thing you should gather the most information on, because that's what we'll go to attack and help you fix. Business location and type, big. SIC codes, NAIC codes, very important. It helps us determine what rules may be applicable to your industry. Core operations, your equipment, what processes you do, material product manufacturing, or services you provide help us determine how far these particular compliance issues may go with you. Process flow, very big in determining what could be an emission source and can be a general, and what's the general sequence for that? Anticipate or know the potential emissions of your water, your air, your land, or maybe know what kind of waste you generate, your determination, if you will. Waste types of generated management practices and material storage information. What do you do? And talk about your process and your wastes. And existing environmental approvals. What do you have already in on file that you may not know about? It's not the first time that I have someone call me and say, I think we need an air permit. And I'll say, I think you have one. And they didn't know it. So talk to us. Maybe we can help. If you're doing any expansions or some construction details, talk to us. We might be able to help. Any specific question or concern for IDEM to address. If it's environmental in nature, please give us a call and we can help. IDEM's office partnership opportunities. We also provide grants and awards and lots of other things to support Indiana business. There's a voluntary program for business. These are voluntary. You are not under any obligation to get involved with them, but they'll have some definite benefits for you. The Indiana Partners for Pollution Prevention, phenomenal organization. It'll give you a great chance for your business to communicate with other government agencies and other businesses. Entitles you to implement and promote P2 ideas. Remember, it's not just about recycling something. It's about preventing the pollution at the very essence of when you start your operation. Business practices and other innovative practices that reduce waste and lead with environmental stewardship in Indiana. Members can enjoy continuous improvement, networking, and recognition opportunities. You will be with groups of other people that are happy to talk to you about what worked for them. You may be similar businesses or competitors, but if there's a particular issue that affects the environment, really everybody benefits if we can all get better at handling it. And you can contact the wonderful Jean Fix for that. I think her number's on the bottom here of 317-233-6660, and she is not related to the devil. Voluntary programs for business, environmental stewardship programs. This is kind of for the elite of the elite. And what I mean by that is these are people that really take environmental leadership and performance serious. They want to lead by example. They're going to design and recognize, and we want to basically reward these companies that are putting out, well, they're exceeding standards. And they have systems in place to manage things that are in the environmental nature. And they're very active in pollution prevention. They have strategies that basically control their whole system of business through their environmental management system, or EMS. If you have an EMS and you're interested in that, you can do applications for the environmental stewardship program. They accept them 2 times a year, in the spring and in the fall. And so your first opportunity is you've got another week or 2, 3 weeks, excuse me, through September 1 through October 31st. Or you can wait till next spring and start April through May 31st. Contact Jean and she can help you. Indiana Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. This is a great notoriety, draw your attention, an improvement program for you guys to consider. Indiana's most prestigious environmental recognition award. It's the Governor's Award. It's there for people that are doing something innovative, something sustainable, real exemplary programs or projects that positively impact Indiana and the environment. Governor is committed to that, and what he wants to basically do is make sure that there are different categories out there that we can identify and acknowledge and heap some praise on, throw some sunshine at companies that are doing it the right way. They can be in the environmental realm, education realm, the outreach realm, the 5-year continuous improvement goals. They can show time over time how they're doing. Greening of Indiana government, land use, pollution prevention, recycling and reuse, energy efficiency, and renewable resources are all different categories where they extend a chance for somebody to show that they're really leading the charge in Indiana. You can talk to Cameron. Cameron Marciano is at 317-233-5434, and he can help you in understanding what you need to do or where you need to do to qualify and then begin your journey toward environmental stewardship. Grant money is available. Back to P2. The U.S. EPA has given us, and we partner with them to, and also we partner with Purdue Manufacturing Extension to offer technical assistance and grant opportunities to Indiana manufacturers. So if you think you want to get something down that's going to help do pollution prevention, and you want the insight of people like the EPA and IDEM and Purdue to help you with that, it is available. Awards available now that once a year, I think you do 15 Indiana manufacturers will receive a waste stream mapping assessment conducted by Purdue and a significantly reduced cost. So I'm not sure what exactly the costs are, but if you talk with Kelly Wagner, who is the Purdue contact, her information is at the bottom of the slide. She will be available to talk to you about what's left. Now, I believe there's only 3 or 4 awards left on that this year. If Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's only a few left, but it will open up again next year.
3 spots left. 3 spots left.
3 spots, okay. Participating facilities may receive up to 40 hours of the following technical assistance and implementation of participating facilities. It can also get some seed grant money for specific projects that they're working on with IDEM. So a lot of really good potential here. You can get some expertise to help you down your road for free. Grant money is great to have. Available grants in the Recycling Market Development Program. Eligible candidates can seek grants starting at $10,000 up to $500,000 with a 50% cash match. Projects should be focused on the increasing recyclable materials, collection and consumption, reduction of municipal solids, shipping, and final disposal, of improving our partnerships in our community through a tangible outreach and educational effort. That means you guys have a system that would really benefit not just your community, but it'd be worthwhile to everybody to start to see You can seek some money for that, but you do have to have a 50% match. You want to reach out to Deanna Gardner at that. She's at 317-233-5433. Grants are available to the public, the private businesses, local governments, municipalities, and non-for-profit organizations that are located in Indiana and doing business in Indiana. Anyone can contact CTAP anytime. Be sure to view and share your brochure. Download if possible. The link is attached below. As I said, my name is Joe Nucleus. I'm in the North Regional Office. My contact information is right here. And we can go back if you have any questions. You're not in the northeast part of Indiana. You have access to several other closer CTAP representatives that will give their contact information on I think it's the 6th or 7th slide in. But please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help.
Thank you so much, Joe.
No problem. Any questions?
Yeah, we're open to questions. I did get a question in the chat, and I would like to take the opportunity to answer that. So the question was, how long does it take to get a response from CTAP once a question is posted in the online portal? So we have both the online computer and the phone app where you can enter your question. Those questions go directly to staff. They're assigned immediately by county. So you would get a person notified in their email box. They would check their list of cases and contact you as soon as possible. So our staff do work 5 days a week, so Monday through Friday, typically from anywhere from 7 till 5 or 6 p.m. Some staff stay later than others. And so your response will be provided according to the complexity that they rate your question. So if your question is a simple question that comes in, they may rate it as a complexity of 1, which is a 1-day turnaround time. And you will see that actually the estimated response date within the portal. So once you submit your request, you'll see the estimated response date within there next to your case. And then you'll receive a response within that time frame. If for some reason the response will take us a little bit longer to research and get back to you, we have 2 other complexity ratings. One that is 5 days, which is a level 2 complexity, or a level 3 complexity, which is a 2-week time frame. So if it's really complex and we're helping you out with some calculations or a variety of areas that we're really digging into the research with you, then it may take a little bit longer to get a full response. But you should expect to have an estimated date within the first 24 hours of entering that into our system, as long as it's not submitted on a Friday night and expected for Saturday or Sunday. So I'll just put that caveat in there. We do not work on the weekends. However, we do try to respond within those service level agreements, and you will receive an email when your case is opened, and you can get the response within the portal. So for instance, if we answer your question, you'll get a little summary of our response within the portal, and you may receive another response via email, and that also tracks along with your request. Hopefully that answered your question about that. Any other questions? We like to think of our new portal as a way for you to document all of your compliance assistance in one location. It is really helpful, as Joe explained, to collaborate with others. So if you're an EHS manager and you would like to show someone else within your facility or share that information with your consultant, you can also collaborate on specific cases or on every case within your portal account. Any further questions? All right, thank you for being here today. I do want to let you know that you will be receiving an email as a follow-up to today's event. It will have links to today's recording, the presentation, and the evaluation. And you will receive a certificate for today's session. We also invite you to follow us on this series and invite you back to any future events that spark your interest. Thanks for being with us today. Have a great day.